Alrighty, y'all, Mr. Montana here. We are going to go ahead and hit these notes describing pairs of angles. So when we are talking about angles, we first off can talk about adjacent angles. So adjacent angles are going to share two things. They're going to share a vertex and they are going to share an adjacent side. All right, and guys, that's just another way of saying it's gonna have one side that's the same. All right, and then they are next to each other. All right, next to each other, that's the definition of adjacent, y'all. So next to adjacent means the same thing. Alrighty, y'all. And so moving on to the second part, it is talking about angle HAG. So we are looking at this angle right here in purple, HAG. And then we are looking at GAM, which is going to be right here. And so we are asking some questions over here. It says, what vertex do both of these angles have? And y'all, the vertex is going to be right here where they both come to a precipice. And that is going to be at A. And then now it's asking, what is the adjacent side? And so the adjacent side is going to be where we see two colors. And that's going to be right here. And how we're going to label that, y'all, is we're going to label it with two colors, and it is going to, or two letters, sorry, and it's going to be AG. And we have to remember that AG is actually a ray. All right, it is not a line or a line segment, it is a ray. And so now we move to this one over here. This one's talking about TIF. So I'm going to go in purple here, TIF. And then the next one's looking at FIG. So FI to G. All right. And so then now it's going to ask the same question. Where's the vertex? The vertex is where the two colors first meet. And that's going to be right here. And that's going to be right at point I. And then it's asking for the adjacent side. And then again, the same thing where the two colors are is going to be right there. And that's going to be at the letters IF. And again, that is going to be a ray, y'all. All right, moving over to this third section right here. It says which angles are adjacent to angle 1. So let's go ahead and highlight angle 1. Angle 1 is going to be this angle right here. All right, and so now it wants to know what angles are adjacent, aka what angles are next to. And so let's go ahead and hit our first adjacent angle in green. And our first adjacent angle here is going to be angle 4 because it is right next to it. And then our other adjacent angle is going to be angle 2 right here. All right, so we can say that angle 4 and angle 2 are adjacent. And so then now it's saying which angles are adjacent to 2. And so 2 is in red, all right? And so 2 is already highlighted in red. If angle 1 is adjacent to angle 2, then angle 2 also has to be adjacent to angle 1. And then let's look. Angle 2 is also adjacent to our other angle over here in blue, which is going to be angle 3. All right. Moving on to complementary angles. All right. This is probably the most important thing, these 4 boxes right here on this entire page. So complementary angles, y'all, this means that they just add up to 90 degrees. All right. So complementary angles sometimes look like this. They can also sometimes look something like this, where it gives you that this box right here forms a 90-degree angle because remember, right angles are 90-degree angles. Or we can be looking at something like a supplementary angle, which is in the next box, and supplementary angles are going to add up to 180 degrees. So we can have an example like this where you have the angle 110 and 70, and you add those up, that's 180. Or you can have something that looks like this, where you're given two 90-degree angles here, and both of those are going to add up to 180, or even something like a linear pair below. All right, and we'll talk about that here in a second. So vertical angles are congruent, right? Congruent. And guys, remember, that's just our fancy word of equal, but we use congruent when talking about shapes. They share a vertex. And this is going to be our part equals part formula that we're going to use, okay? And so we would say that this one here and this one are vertical angles. But we can also say on the opposite side that this one here and this one here are vertical. So my purple are vertical with each other, and then my red are vertical with each other. It just means they're across from a vertex, all right? So they're on opposite sides of a vertex. Then looking at a linear pair, y'all, a linear pair, they are actually always going to be supplementary angles. And they are always going to add up to 180 degrees because they are supplementary angles. And the formula we're going to use is our part plus part equals whole. But in this case, our whole is 180. And linear pairs are always going to look something like this. All right, y'all, moving on to the back page. It says to name a pair of complementary angles. So we have to remember that complementary angles, y'all, that means that 90 degrees. And so we can look at one. One is 80, so the other angle would have to be a 10. There's no 10 here. Angle 4 is already 120, so that's already too much. But then we have angle 2, which is 60, and angle 3, which is 30. 60 plus 30 equals 90. So that is our answer. So angle 2 and angle 3 are complementary. And then our next one says what supplementary angles do we have? And that's adding up to 180. And so if I'm looking at angle 1, 80, well then I have 100 left over, but I don't have an angle that's 100, so 1's gone. Angle 3 is 30, so then I have to have an angle that's 150, but I don't have that, so 3's gone. And so then I look at 2, it's 60. I should have a missing angle of 120, which I do have, and so therefore angle 2 and angle 4 are supplementary angles. And then now looking at this top right hand corner, it says name two linear pairs. So it means two numbers that are right next to each other, right? That form a straight line is essentially what we're looking at. So 1 and 2 are linear pairs, and 2 and 4 are linear pairs. I want to go ahead and list out the rest, y'all. 4 and 3 are also linear pairs. And lastly, 3 and 1 are linear pairs, all right? So there's always 4 sets of linear pairs when you're looking at a picture that looks like this, all right? Now it says to label 2 sets of vertical angles. So 2 and 3 because they're opposite of the vertex. And then 1 and 4. All right, true or false here. All adjacent angles are linear pairs. So that is going to be false, y'all. All adjacent angles are not linear pairs. So I could have something like this. These are adjacent angles, but they do not form 180 degrees, all right? And then the next one says all linear pairs are adjacent. And guys, that is going to be true because in order to have a linear pair, they have to be right next to each other and form a straight line, all right? So all linear pairs will have to be adjacent. All right, and then steps to finding the measure of angle. You need to determine what relationship of the angle that you're using. Are you using a vertical pair or a linear pair? Do you have a supplementary angle? Do you have a complementary angle? Those are the types of things that you're gonna have to use, all right? If you're using vertical angles, so then you have to use your part equals part. If you're using a linear pair, then you have to use the part plus part equals 180. Solve for x, and then plug back in if it's asking for a specific angle, okay? If it's asking for, like, what's on question 9, what's the measure of angle 2, we're gonna have to plug back in, all right? And so what this tells us right here on question 9, let's go ahead and start it. It tells us that the measure of angle 1, which is going to be right here, is going to be 120 degrees, all right? And we can clearly see that this right here makes a straight line, and so we're gonna assume that they are a linear pair. And so I know that I have to use part plus part equals 180. So I get part plus 120 equals 180. Then I'm going to solve minus 120 minus 120. And so then I get that part equals 60 here. And so that part is also represented by angle 2. So angle 2 will equal 60 in this case, all right? And so then moving on to the next one, it says find the measure of the missing angle. And so we are trying to find the measure of the missing angle. And we're gonna go ahead and find all the angles here. So the first property that we're gonna use is our vertical angle property. We know that this 120 is opposite of a vertex with angle 2. So therefore we can assume that angle 2 is also gonna be 120. But now we need to find angle 1 and angle 3, all right? And these angles are gonna be congruent. So angle 1 is going to be congruent to angle 3 because they are also vertical angles. But angle 2 and angle 3 are a linear pair. So I can assume that angle 3 plus angle 2 should equal 180. I now know that 180 is 120, or angle 2 is 120. And so then I subtract 120, y'all, and I get 60. So now I get that angle 1 and 3 are going to equal 60 degrees. So I can label this whole graph here 120, 160, and 60, all right? All right, moving on to the last two questions, question 11 and question 12. So now we need to assess, are we dealing with a vertical angle or a linear pair? So you should be able to see that these are right next to each other, therefore it makes it a linear pair. And so we need to ask, are these angles going to be the same, so congruent, or are they going to be supplementary? So linear pairs, we have to remember that these are supplementary always. And our formula for linear pairs is going to be the part plus part equals 180. So really I'm doing 4x plus 5x equals 180. So I get 9x equals 180. And then I'm going to divide this whole thing by 9. And so I'm left with 180 equals 90. And I will get that in my calculator and get 20. So x equals 20. And y'all, my question actually just asked me to solve for x. But if I asked you to plug it in, you would have to go back in and plug into the 4x and the 5x. And you'll be able to get your answers for the entire angles of that picture. All right. Looking at question 12, we are looking at vertical angles. And then vertical angles we know are congruent. And so that is our part equals part. And so I'm left with 3x plus 20 equals 7x minus 8. And so then I'm going to add 8. I'm left with 3x plus 28 equals 7x minus 3x minus 3x. And I get that 28 equals 4x. Last step is going to be divide by 4. And so I will get that x is going to equal 7. And again, this question was just asking me for x. If it was asking me for anything else, I would have to go back and plug in. Alrighty, y'all. Thank y'all for tuning into this lesson. I hope y'all have a great rest of y'all's evening. Bye.